I want to welcome everyone to another episode of Behind the Shades. I have my lovely guest here, Adriana. And Adriana, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are?
Yeah, so I'm Adriana. I had cerebral palsy. I stopped breathing during birth, and the lack of oxygen caused brain damage. So I don't have use of my hands or my legs. I use a power wheelchair, and growing up, I went to regular public schools, and came to Massachusetts for college or university, as you call it. And I've been in the Boston area ever since. So it'll be 26 years this summer coming up that I will be here in Massachusetts. And um, I now own a startup that is creating technology to help individuals with disabilities lead more independent and inclusive lives. I'm also a co founder of another startup where we're trying to create a network of aspiring and current entrepreneurs with disabilities, and as well as small startups and organizations that serve the disability community. So that's a brief overview.
Perfect. And how important is it for you to start these companies that's assisting a community that you belong into?
Um, I think it's really important. I'm all about empowering other people, empowering marginalized communities, and that is, that is where I get my greatest satisfaction in helping others. And so by doing what I'm doing right now with these two startups, just it makes me excited about doing this work and making things better for all of us.
It's exciting to hear because there's so many people who will not be going through what you're going through and they're unable to satisfy their dreams or they're unable to accomplish their goals, and here you are experiencing something that happened at childbirth, as you mentioned, and you're able to do so much and be a beacon for those who maybe some suffering something similar, maybe experiencing something different, but it's still as impactful as what you're going through. For those who may not know, um, what is exactly cerebral palsy?
Yeah, so there are very different versions of cerebral palsy, or CP for short. Um, and CP is where the parts of your brain that control your motor functions, your muscles, are affected. And so there are very different variations where it could just be one limb that's affected. It could be half of your body. It could be hearing, sight, speech, cognition. So there are so many different degrees of CP. And again, for me, it was because I stopped breathing. Premature babies often may have CP as a result of being born prematurely. So there are so many different factors, but it usually happens um, shortly before, during, or after birth. And that is uh, how you get CP. So it's not contagious. It's not an illness. Can't catch it from anyone. Because there are people that ask those questions. And no.
And it's good that you clarified that because we definitely don't want things to be more difficult. And you're right; it's something that as you mentioned, it's not contagious. You can't look at someone and get it. And I appreciate you sharing that knowledge for those who maybe are unaware and they don't want to treat anyone differently just because they may not have the knowledge base. Um, but starting, taking a step back, what made you decide that you want to continue down this path of doing these two startups and assisting others? Like, was there something that made you want to do that? Like, explain that journey and how you started.
Um, I learned at a very young age that technology was going to be the way that I would be able to do anything and everything that I would ever want to do. And this was back in the early to mid 80s when I was a child. And I always had that ambition to learn the latest technology. I love problem solving, so I always was thinking of ways to make things better, and not only for myself, but other people like myself that I met along the way. I always envisioned myself working for a tech company that made assistive technology. So, technology specifically for people with disabilities. That had always been a dream of mine once I became hooked on technology at a young age. After graduating from college in 2000, I had two separate resumes. So, a regular resume to get the average typical job. And then a second resume that listed all of the assistive technology that I was familiar with, had experience with, etc. And I would send those out to all the companies that I knew and whose products that I had used along the way. But at the time, they were focused on only having people who had engineering background work for them. So back in that time, they weren't really including the actual user, right? People with disabilities, to give them information and feedback on the products. And so they were just focused on getting someone with what they believed is what every person was an engineer, with those skills that they learned in college or schooling. And so I didn't get, any of those jobs. And so along the way, I worked at different jobs. And then back at the end of 2014, I received, I was forwarded an email, and I actually was forwarded this email from three different people. So I was like, oh my God, people who know me really know me. And they sent me this email that MIT was looking for people with disabilities who had ideas to solve a problem. And, to submit your idea and then to see if you would get chosen to participate in a hackathon. And so I was so excited because I'm such a geek, and this was like the best thing I could have received. And so I sent in my idea, and I was one of, I think, 14 or 15 chosen to participate for that February of 2015. And at the hackathon, um, our team won first place. And
Congratulations.
thank you. And that's kind of how it all started. For because they were students, they didn't work on it as much as I would have liked. And they moved on. And then a longtime friend at the time was getting her master's and she did her thesis on hackathons. And she said, "So, what are you going to do now?" And I said, "I don't know. I would like to continue." And so we partnered up and applied for grants and applied for accelerator programs. And May or April of 2017, we got a grant from Veterans Affairs, Department of Veterans Affairs here in the US. And we got into Mass Challenge, one of the top accelerator programs here in Boston. And everything kind of fell together, and the rest is history, I guess you could say.
That's an amazing accomplishment that you were. So from what you're telling me, you were there from the very beginning. Like you won the contest, you were able to get the grants, and now here you are becoming, in a way, a part of history. Like how important is that to you?
um, yeah, I mean, I'm just this thing, this idea that I've had in my head for a long time came to fruition. Um, it's not on the market yet, but it's being worked on still and almost finalized. But I mean, that's the exciting part, is that this thing that had been in my head is a real life, tangible item now that people could use and benefit from. And that's what's really exciting. So I don't know if I'm part of history per se, but it's part of my history, that's for sure.
Yeah, and that's the good thing, right? Because history is what you make it. It may not be anywhere in a history book, but you never know, right? But it's definitely a
Right.
part of your history and a part of your legacy.
Yeah.
And is that something that you always wanted to be a part of? Like, did you always want to be a part of something that potentially can change so many lives for the better in the future?
Yes, definitely. And that's why I had always aspired to work for a company, right? I never aspired, and that's the funny thing. I never aspired to have my own company. My aspiration was to work for a company that developed technologies such as what we're working on, and just be able to get share my ideas and bring them to life, have those resources to bring them to life. So that was my aspiration, was to share my ideas so others could create these things to help people. And so that's what's more important to me, is being able to bring these ideas to life.
One thing that is important to me, and it seems like it's important to you, is I always felt at a young age that I was going to impact people for the better. And I always felt that I was put on this earth to make a difference in someone's life. And even if it's one person, I would feel blessed, I would feel fulfilled, and I would feel complete because there's so many of us who have an idea that it just stays in our head and it doesn't ever become reality.
Mm.
And to see you do what you do, and I'll share a little story for myself. For me to have you on this podcast or to even start this podcast, this was something that was 2 years in the making. And maybe I didn't have the courage to start it 2 years ago, but definitely there were some missing elements. I thought that I would have the support that I was expecting back then, and I didn't. I thought that maybe I would have the time that I did back then, and I didn't. And when 2020 hit and the pandemic, and with everything coming to a stall or a stop, and life changing as we know it, because 2019 is definitely different than 2020, right? I was like, something clicked. Something was like, this is the time for me to do this. This is the time for me to start this. This is the time for me to start listening to so many different and beautiful stories across the world. And I'm truly honored to hear your story, and I'm truly honored to share it. And I tell this because I know for me, there was that moment where I'm like, it needs to start now.
Mhm.
Did you have that moment in your life where you're like, today is the day, today is the moment, this is the beginning of what I'm going to do for tomorrow? Did you have that moment?
I think, and someone, this has been a question that has been asked of me several times, and I feel like I have had many aha moments in my life that led me to the next step, and which then led me to another aha moment, right? So I think one of the big aha moments to actually pursue, um, a dream and pursue entrepreneurship was being laid off from a job that I was so miserable at. Um, and it was a job, right? And so for people with disabilities, it's really hard to get a job. So when you get a job, you kind of put up with it, even if it's not your perfect job, um, even if it's something that you're so unhappy with. And and I did that. I did that for a really long time. And so getting laid off, I was upset the day that I got laid off. And the next day, I was just energized. I updated my resume. I started looking things up, and things like that. And a friend of mine was like, "Why don't you consult? You have all this knowledge, all this experience." And so, yeah, that was one of the biggest moments, was getting laid off from a full time job that I was so miserable at. And it gave me the push because I wasn't pushing because I was comfortable in the fact that I had a job. I had an income, and so I didn't want to rock the boat, I guess you could say. But yeah, that was the push I needed.
And how do you feel now that you've taken that you use that push? Do you feel happier and do you feel more free now?
Yes, both. I do. I mean, and that's the other thing. Entrepreneurship is not glamorous. There are days where you're like, why am I doing this? Having a job is is better because you don't have to worry about all these other things. And um but in the long run, yes, I am happier. I feel free. um and I'm doing something that means not just a lot to me, but not just to me, but I'm helping others in that process. And so it's kind of funny that every once in a while, when I get that feeling of, oh, why am I still doing this? Right? If, things are not going well with funding and things like that. And you say to yourself, oh, goodness, like, just apply for a job and, you wouldn't have all these worries. And then I'll get a message from a random person who found me, and I don't know how they found me, and found my work. And they're like, oh, we can't wait for the device to come out. We can't wait. It's going to help me do XYZ. And then I feel reinvigorated to keep going. So that's what really helps. Is just hearing from people that can benefit, and getting that reminder that what I'm doing is not just about me, but it's about other people as well.
And I think that's the best way to look at it. And that's the way I look at this podcast, for example. Yes, I enjoy and I love having these stories, and definitely, it helps me become more known and things like that. Yeah, that's a bonus. But the best joy that I get from it and was when I hear the positive feedback. A couple of days ago, someone told me, about an episode that I shared that I launched, and they said that it was so motivating for them. They said that they can relate to the young lady's experiences that she was sharing there, and that's more important than anything. When you hear the community that you're assisting, the community that you're reaching, say that, you know what, we're excited you're doing this because we feel like you're doing it for us.
Mm-hmm.
They make you feel like you're a part of them, regardless if it's a different skin color, hair color, eye color, belief.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, I think what we all need to come back to, and this will extend to the political climate, the social climate that's going on now, we all bleed, we all cry, we all want to be loved, and we all want to feel that we belong. So it
Yes.
doesn't matter the differences that we come with, because the packaging is still the same and the contents is still the same.
Yeah.
So for you to help those and to hear that they're coming up to you and saying that, they can't wait for it to come out, you're definitely making a difference. Did you did you ever feel that you would get this type of feedback or this type of anticipation for what you're doing?
No, I didn't. And it started after we won the hackathon. We won the hackathon, and we got so much press. We were even in the New York Times at that time. And we were receiving emails from people all over the globe. It was amazing. And so that was really great. And I think that's what definitely pushed me to move forward and keep going with it initially, because it just started from a hack, and um it was a very rudimentary device that was built in 10 hours. Uh and so just from that, getting all that feedback, it really pushed me. And I think it pushed all of like the whole team, all of past and present team members to keep going with this. And I think that's why we've been able to get as far as we have, because of that, because we know it's not just, you know, as a company to grow our company. That's not what this is about. It's about creating something that will help others become more independent, um, not have to be so reliant on others. Because I personally know how that feels, and I don't like it. So and so that's why I know that what this device can do for so many like myself.
Is that something that is difficult for you and maybe others in a similar situation to deal with? Is that maybe you are viewed as being more dependent on others when you want more independence?
Yes, that is definitely true. And also society, right? There are societal views and antiquated ideals that have been perpetuated, right, over the years, making it seem like people with disabilities are a drain on society, are a drain on the system, uh, financially and otherwise. And so, to show and to be able to actually be a productive member of society is good all around, not just for the person that has a disability, but for their community. They have so much to contribute. I am contributing to my community by paying my taxes, by providing jobs, and the device that we're creating to create other productive members of society. Um, so yeah, it is, but But that's another thing that I hope that our organization can change, is that perception of disability. We need to change the narrative of what disability means. And I think COVID, that's the silver lining of COVID, is now everyone works remotely. And this is something that people with disabilities have asked for ages. And employers would say, oh, it's not possible. And yet here we are. Everyone's remote pretty much. It's not necessary to be in person. Now we have the technology to do video calls, to collaborate online on documents. So there's everything that people had asked for, people with disabilities had asked for as reasonable accommodations so they could perform their jobs. Um, Suddenly it's okay for everyone to be able to do it. So I think the silver lining of COVID is that, I think it has definitely opened up doors for people with disabilities. There's no longer that physical barrier, right? Where if there is something that you want to go to and the building has stairs and you use a wheelchair, well, everything's on a virtual platform now. So you can attend. I've seen so many people with disabilities post how they have attended, um, for the first time, a Seder with their friends and family because there were no access barriers. They were sharing a meal together virtually on a video conferencing platform, but they were together. It was their first time being able to do that. And so, yeah, I think, this is one of the most, I think, eye-opening experiences for all people. There another thing is that so many people are saying, oh my goodness, I'm so isolated. I can't do this anymore, complaining. And there's so many people with disabilities that this is their everyday lives. They don't have the option to just get up and go outside. They don't have that option to say, oh, I just want to, go out for a walk or go out. I mean, if they're reliant on other people, sometimes those people don't show up. Sometimes, there are certain issues going on. And so I think it's been eye-opening for a lot of people.
And I will agree. It seems, and I was talking to someone about this earlier, it seems a lot of the things that we took for granted, the ability to go outside, just get up and walk or see whoever, has been restricted in one way or another. And I will say that there has been a number of silver linings in the pandemic, and you raised one of them because it seems three areas have been getting a lot more focus now. Those are special needs, right? Because some of the things that they wanted, they were told, to your point, we only could do it in phases. We can't
So,
do it. It's going to take some time.
and I interrupt you for one
Of
second.
course. Yes.
So, the term special needs is a term that most of us no longer subscribe to.
Okay.
As you stated earlier, we all need love, right? We all need companionship. We all need a roof over our heads, food. And so the word disability or disabled is a perfectly good word. It's not a dirty word. And that is the preferred term to
Okay.
use. So yeah.
Okay, I appreciate you letting me know that because I was under the impression that the other word, but if that's what is the preferred term, definitely, definitely. So yeah, so those with disabilities, it's we highlighted those with disabilities because now we can focus on some of the things that they wanted that maybe companies in general were slow to provide. And another area we focus on is mental and physical health, where we've neglected that for so long, and now it's basically in our face and we can't hide from it anymore. Not saying that we did hide from it, but in a way we did, because we always thought that, well, that's that person's issue, right? And human beings, I think, have, and we are seeing this in display across the world, we have a bad track record of saying that if I'm not directly impacted by it, then it's not on my radar.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
if we all want the same things, that, you know what, your plight should be my plight, and what I go through, you should be able to relate to as well. Maybe not directly, but you should have some sympathy and empathy for it. And a third, I will say, is we realize that this technology was always there. We may not have been using it in the most appropriate ways,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's not like we woke up one day, January 1st, 2020, and we're like, oh my goodness, everything is making sense, right?
Exactly.
It was always there to make sense. We are just not making sense of it. Is that something that you would agree with?
Oh yes, totally, 100%. You have put it so eloquently. Everything that I've been thinking and feeling throughout this whole 2020 experience.
So, what is next for Adriana? What are some of the intentions or goals you want to do for 2021?
I want to finalize our device, the Puffin. I want it to start bringing it out for people to use, and get some feedback and make it better. Um, like I said, I'm also working on something called Quark Labs, which is um, our network of entrepreneurs with disabilities. And so I want that to move forward as well. So yeah, those are the top things, and just to stay healthy. Can't wait to get my vaccine and be able to be out and about. I haven't been in a public space since March of 2020. So because I can't really wear a mask because I drive my wheelchair with my mouth. So if my mouth is covered, it's a little difficult to actually drive my chair. So that's a problem.
Would you, and I ask a few people who are helping the community, helping others, always ask them this question because it's something that I always ask myself from time to time. If you were to impact positively, let's say 100 people, would you want to meet each and every one of them just to say thank you and to hear their story and how you've impacted them?
I would love to. I would love to hear. I would love to hear why. Like, I just, um, I like hearing people's stories just like you do, right? And hearing their why is so important to me, just to learn about that person and to have a new perspective on things, right? And so we can't grow and learn without hearing and being able to empathize with others and learn from their experiences. So I think that's really important to be able to listen and learn from other people's perspectives and experiences.